Grand Master Yoda was born 896 years before the Battle of Yavin, less than 2 centuries after the new Sith Lords and the apparent extinction of the Sith Order on Ruusan. His species and origin are unknown, and even the circumstances of how he joined the Jedi Order are shrouded in mystery. Legend holds that Yoda was trained by Jedi Master Nakata del Gormo in the swamps of Dagobah. What is known is that Yoda trained his first Padawan and attained the rank of Jedi Master at the age of 96 in 800 BBY. Eventually, he was given the title of Grand Master along with a lifelong seat on the Jedi Council. Yoda would ultimately have the misfortune of presiding over the twilight of the old Jedi Order. The Sith, having survived the final battle of Ruusan, had gone into hiding, quietly infiltrating and undermining the Republic's political system, their schemes culminating with the start of the Clone Wars. With the Jedi forced into combat roles they were neither trained nor prepared for, Yoda watched helplessly as the organization was bled dry from attrition before being utterly destroyed by Sith treachery. Yoda attempted to strike back by attacking the reigning Dark Lord of the Sith, revealed to be the Republic's Supreme Chancellor, Palpatine. The two would wage a fierce duel in the Senate Hall before Yoda was forced to flee. Going into hiding on Dagobah, Yoda trained Luke Skywalker in the Jedi ways before dying of old age in 4 BBY. Yoda would transcend the physical plane as a Force spirit, while Skywalker went on to overthrow the Sith and found the new Jedi Order. Nearly 7 years would pass until Skywalker's new Jedi Order was established, and among this new generation of peacekeepers came the esteemed Jedi Master Kip Durron. Born 7 years before the Battle of Yavin, Kip Durron was a powerful Jedi Master who stood as one of the most polarizing individuals in galactic history. Discovered to be Force-sensitive by Han Solo after being liberated from slavery in the spice mines of Kessel, Kip joined Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy, where his abnormal strength in the Force, along with his aptitude for learning new techniques, allowed him to surpass his fellow students in a mere week, despite joining the Academy later than the other students. Despite his prodigious strength in the Force, Durron's deep-seated anger against his former captors was easily exploited by the spirit of the long-dead Sith Lord Exar Kun. This culminated in the young knight activating a superweapon known as the Sun Crusher, obliterating the entire Carida system. Though he was eventually able to free himself from the Dark Lord's influence, Durron would be greatly affected by his brief stint as a Dark Jedi, his desire to repent for his actions manifesting itself in a high-profile campaign across the Outer Rim, as a part of a new philosophy of direct action against anyone whom he perceived as evil. When the extragalactic Yuuzhan Vong attacked the galaxy in 25 ABY, Durron was one of the first masters to meet the threat, losing his apprentice Miko Regalia and many other Jedi in the opening salvos of the war. His policy of assertive action was enhanced by this new conflict. Durron began leading like-minded Jedi to war against the wishes of Master Skywalker. Though initially successful, further losses compelled Durron to reconcile with the Grand Master, joining him in the newly formed Galactic Federation of Free Alliances and the reacquisition of Coruscant, ending the war. Following this victory, Durron would be granted a seat on the Jedi High Council, serving as one of the body's leading and most outspoken members. Although peace would hold for nearly a decade, events would take a dire turn when intersystem conflicts on Corellia escalated into a full-scale galactic civil war in 40 ABY. Despite his past differences with Luke Skywalker, Durron would stand firm with the Grand Master when the Order was declared an enemy of the state when Jacen Solo took over the government and attempted to put the galaxy under Sith rule as the Sith Lord Darth Caedus. Following Caedus' death at the hands of his twin sister Jaina Solo, the entire galaxy entered a period of peace and restoration under Chief of State Natasi Dalia. One of Durron's former Imperial enemies, Dala's policies included attempted to curb the autonomy of the Jedi Order, which Durron weathered along with his peers, and was instrumental in helping the Solos expose Chief of State Dala for various illegal activities, removing her from office. Hello YouTube, this is the Phoenix Exalt bringing you the next installment of my Versus series. For this analysis, I will be using Yoda during the time frame of Revenge of the Sith, and Kip Durron from the time frame of Fate of the Jedi. I will be pulling from Legends continuity along with any canon materials that do not directly interfere with previously made Legends materials. Due to the fact that the Disney Story Group is going in a direction that is neither original nor creative, I will not be using canon as the main point of Star Wars media for my videos. Though I am quite willing to use characters and events that do not overwrite previous ones, as I quite like these characters and they only add to the universe and do not detract in almost any way. As always, I own none of the characters, art, music, or other media depicted in the video, and all rights to them go to their respective companies. With that out of the way, I present to you Yoda versus Kip Durron. If these masters of their order met on the battlefield, who would be the victor? I will begin, as always, with Force abilities. Yoda has claimed that he was just as viable in his old age as he was in his youth. However, one could object to the validity of this when his attributes are seriously examined. His species was unknown, and it is most commonly referred to as Yoda's species. Yoda was characterized by a short stature, green-hued skin, 3-clawed hands, and abnormally long lifespans. Yoda himself being 877 years old by the time of Revenge of the Sith. However, Yoda was long past his physical prime, and it showed. His muscles were racked with arthritis, requiring him to use a cane to maintain basic mobility. His walking pace was little more than a trot, even for someone of his size. His officially published strength and constitution levels are low on a good day, and he has even been depicted having labored breathing. Yoda's combative viability relied solely on force-based physical augmentation, and while many of his shortcomings, particularly strength and dexterity, were ironed out by this, it didn't change the fact that he was significantly more reliant on the ability than most Jedi. This effect can be best described by thinking of a car that can only drive with the gas pedal pressed to the floor. Against weaker foes, Yoda can physically outperform them with little effort, but against opponents of comparable power, his need to continually push himself to the limit has an adverse effect on his force energy reserves. Speaking of his reserves, Yoda has a serious cap on his stamina, his short bout with Dooku on Geonosis leaving Yoda visibly exhausted, and fatigue being one of the main reasons why Yoda abandoned his duel with Darth Sidious. Again, while his use of the Force allowed him to hold down a sustained lightsaber duel, it was not a state he could hold out forever. At the end of the day, Yoda is like a fire. It burns brightest right before it goes out. Kip Durron was a roughly average human male. As noted by the Essential Guide to Alien Species, humans were the most populous species in the galaxy, an advanced race possessing highly evolved brains, advanced hardiness, and adaptability to sudden changes in the environment. At 51 years of age, Durron stood at 1.77 meters tall, and has been described as having a powerful yet slender build. The fact that this build carried from his teens until his early 50s is a testament to an intense training regimen and the sustaining power of the light side of the Force. Distinguished for his above-average reflexes, Kip was extremely acrobatic, and has demonstrated his ability with Force speed on multiple occasions. He has blitzed stormtroopers, left afterimage, outran a young Leviathan as a teenager, and kept pace with council-level adepts such as Jaina Solo and Luke Skywalker as an adult. Moving into feats of strength, Kip had no trouble deflecting bolts from a Class 20 freighter on his lightsaber, nor was he troubled entering into a tug-of-war with the Yuuzhan Vong Slayer, though it should be noted the Slayer was poisoned at the time. As mentioned previously, humans were renowned for their physical resilience, and Durron was no exception. During a mission to Corvus, he withstood multiple hits from a young dark-side Leviathan and continued to fight on despite the beast's incredible strength. Several years later, he tanked a blast of Force lightning from Jaina Solo and was able to remain focused enough to dispel it, an impressive feat given Tutumenis's complexity as a power. Additionally, while not explicitly stated, it is my belief that Durron was not under any amount of true pain from the attack, as the book makes no note of him being in any sort of true physical pain, despite the attack being described as having a deadly aura. Durron's hardiness was so widely known that Grand Master Luke Skywalker would use the phrase, "putting you through a training course so hard it would make Kip Durron cry," as a method to scare unruly Padawans into compliance. All in all, Kip Durron is a beast of a man who will withstand anything but a fatal wound. This conclusion is easy to call. While Yoda's speed and agility should never be discounted, the fact remains that Yoda is incredibly old with comparatively weak stamina to Durron. Kip Durron's strength, speed, and dexterity, along with his constitution, are at least equal if not greater than Yoda's, and he has the physical stamina to go on for long periods of time. If for some reason the two ever got into a fistfight without weapons or force powers, I think most people will not have trouble placing their bets on a 51-year-old human over a 900-year-old little troll. Jedi Master Kip Durron gets the edge in physical abilities. Now we examine their aptitude with martial arts and lightsaber dueling. Grand Master Yoda was widely regarded as the greatest lightsaber master of his era, and hailed as one of the finest instructors in the Order's history. However, despite being one of the most heavily featured characters in the Star Wars franchise, Yoda has surprisingly few dueling feats to his name. Fortunately, what is given is more than enough to work with. At some point, Yoda fought and defeated the Force Witches of Dathomir and a group of Befasi Dark Jedi. Virtually no record exists of these confrontations other than that they happened, and they have never been expanded further than a passing reference in some media. His three major duels during the Clone Wars were much more substantial. During the course of the Clone Wars, Yoda managed to overcome both Count Dooku and Darth Sidious in prolonged lightsaber engagements. While I do believe that some of the credit to Yoda's two victories over Dooku should be attributed to his intimate knowledge of Dooku's style and tendencies, rather than just pure skill, it does not change the fact that Dooku opted to retreat during both engagements on Geonosis and Vijun respectively. During the duel in the Senate arena, Yoda would have no such advantages, and yet was able to meet Darth Sidious's unrestrained saber onslaught head-on, where three of his fellow council masters were cut down within seconds of each other. Though not depicted in the film, both the adult and the junior novelization of Revenge of the Sith depict a sequence in which Yoda disarmed Sidious of his weapon, a feat to this day, even including all canon materials Disney has released thus far, has only been replicated by Mace Windu and Luke Skywalker. Moving on to the more technical side of things, Yoda was a high-level master of all 7 forms with the sole exception of the Vaapad variation of Form 7, Juyo. Yoda's preferred form was Form 4, Ataru, which he used to compensate for the limitations of his reach imposed by his height and age. Ataru, also known as the Way of the Hawkbat, was the 4th form of lightsaber combat developed and the most acrobatic of them all, using elaborate flourishing swordplay reinforced by force-assisted acrobatics and physical combat techniques to outmaneuver and overpower opponents. As noted by the Fight Saber article, Yoda took his application of the elements of Form 4 to its highest level. These elements were known as the Su-Ma rotations. The Su-Ma rotations represent the three axes of motion possible in a three-dimensional space. There is Jum-Su-Ma, spins, Ton-Su-Ma, somersaults, and En-Su-Ma, cartwheels. Each of these techniques factored heavily into the Grandmaster's style and formed the backbone of his blade work. Equipped with a green Shoto saber, Yoda's offense was as overwhelming as they came. He would attack with a barrage of slashes and unarmed strikes and keep that barrage up for as long as it took to shatter his foe's defenses. However wild and aggressive he was, Yoda did not throw himself into combat with total reckless abandon. Unlike conventional practitioners of Ataru such as Satil Shan, Yoda displayed a clear preference for the technique known as the Saber Swarm, which was a series of fast strikes aimed at an opponent's flank to undermine their defenses. While Form 4 obviously took center stage in his offensive due to the fact that his short reach and stature made Juyo and Jemso useless to him, his technique also displayed elements of Makashi and Niman. These elements were mainly in the use of some gem disarming strikes and his deft integration of force powers into his lightsaber sequences. Though Ataru is noted to lack defense, Yoda compensated for his mastery of Surisu using an intricate combination of shunt blocks and parries to ward off attacks as they came, while a minimalistic shift of weight and stance enabled him to perform deft evasions. That being said, he has had his defensive penetrated by Dooku before he could complete his training, though I attribute that to a more of exceptional skill showing on Dooku's part rather than a lack of skill on behalf of Yoda. The technicals of Yoda's style made it nigh impossible for offensive heavyweights like Sidious to overpower him in a direct assault, as his small size and agility enabled him to evade their attacks, get inside their guard, and cut them down almost immediately. Though some of Yoda's successes as a combatant can be attributed to his knowledge of all 7 forms, literal centuries of experience, and his tremendous speed, Yoda's skill was undeniable, and against a lower caliber adversary, Yoda is practically untouchable and borderline invincible, capable of dealing with anything thrown against him and responding with greater force in all areas. However, one must not mistake mastery for perfection. As noted by Yoda in the Jedi Path, Form 4 practitioners are almost always on the offensive, with the style itself being an exhaustive practice. This means that by nature, Yoda burns off a lot of energy in combat very quickly, which makes his style unsustainable in the long term for someone of his age. Due to the fact that Yoda's style is based on the enhancement of the Ataru norms, this also meant that his weaknesses in a duel were tied directly to his weaknesses of Ataru. While I disagree with the notion that Yoda's application of Ataru was textbook and nothing more, no one can deny that Yoda's application is far more conventional than that of Qui-Gon Jinn. While Jinn compensated for Ataru's lack of sustainability by shifting his focus to strength, Yoda simply elevated his practice to such an insane degree that the prerequisite for defeating him would be a Tier 1 application of either Makashi, Surisu, or defensive Djem-So, and the number of combatants that can match Yoda's saber offense is pathetically small. This isn't to say that Yoda was unintelligent in the development of his style, but when the first person to put real pressure on Yoda is the most powerful Dark Lord of the Sith in the galactic history, it makes sense that Yoda did not feel the need to continue to develop his style, as he was already one of, if not the best around, and he already had a disdain for combat. On the whole, Grandmaster Yoda was easily the greatest academic master of combat in his era, by no means infallible when it came to applying his skills in single combat. Any fight with him was guaranteed to be an uphill one, regardless of the opponent's skill set. Although he was a fearsome and rebellious master who spent much of his formative years on the front lines, Kip Durron remained a highly respected member of the Jedi Council, who inspired an entire generation of passionate, prospective Padawans. In terms of accolades, Durron was counted as one of the greatest blades beings the New Jedi Order ever produced. Grandmaster Luke Skywalker regarded his skills as equal to that of renowned Jedi Battle Master Kyle Katarn, and greater than that of Council Master Kilgal. Durron's capabilities were such that he was one of 3 Jedi Masters considered for the position of head of a strike team to hunt down and capture or neutralize Darth Caedus. This is the same Caedus who just weeks earlier had gone toe-to-toe with Luke Skywalker and lived to tell about it. Shifting to direct feats, Kip is analogous to Yoda in that he only has a few dueling feats to his name, and, in terms of fights with beings equal to his level, Durron has only been depicted facing 2 opponents equal to him in skill. However, like Yoda, this is not an issue since his 2 opponents are extremely talented swordsmen who are well documented in terms of skill and power. While Yoda was pitted against Dooku and Palpatine, Durron was able to subdue a young Jaina Solo who was amped by the dark side, and was able to fight on equal terms with Grand Master Luke Skywalker in a high-intensity sparring match. While sparring and a fight to the death carry different connotations, the sparring match that Kip participated in was described as being terribly dangerous to anyone but a Jedi Master. Kip has made his mark outside of his duels, however, and has slain numerous Imperials, Yuuzhan Vong warriors, and Lost Tribe of the Sith members during their respective invasions. Moving on into technique, Kip Durron's attributes were most heavily fleshed out in the novel I, Jedi, the New Jedi Order book series, the New Jedi Order source book, and the Dark Side source book. As noted by each source, Durron was a very well-rounded martial artist with training in the Jedi standard for lightsaber combat and force abilities, as well as other disciplines such as marksmanship, unarmed combat, and piloting. Upon his admittance to the Jedi Praxium on Yavin 4, Kip was taught in the 3 Rings of Defense by Cam Solusar and Luke Skywalker. The 3 Rings of Defense would remain his primary martial arts discipline for the rest of his career. Essentially a hybrid of the strong, medium, and fast styles, the 3 Rings of Defense were a simplistic form of combat designed to introduce the students of Luke's Academy to the principles of lightsaber combat. The main difference being that it functioned as one fluid form rather than 3 separate styles. As described by Corran's Horn, the style consisted of 3 sets of unique stances and maneuvers that dealt with dueling at various ranges. The outer ring consisting of grand sweeping power attacks, the middle ring consisting of sharp strikes designed to redirect projectiles, and the inner ring using tight conservative blocks aimed at shunting aside power attacks and parrying a probing offensive. Durron's offense could be best described as a tempered storm, using pinpoint power blows to either shut aside attacks or pick apart an opponent's defense, then quickly executing them with a bisecting cleave or slash. The Jedi Master heavily reinforced these attacks with integrated force abilities, having a particular fondness for telekinesis and lightning. Shifting over to defense, Kip Durron's personal style took full advantage of the middle and inner ring logistics. When engaging other duelists, he relied on tight conservative parries to shunt aside attacks and precise shift in weight to enable swift evasions. During his match with Luke Skywalker with Luke on the attack, Kip Durron would adopt a defensive stance, meeting the Grand Master's assault with equal speed and tight, efficient movements. This implies that Kip Durron is at least as fast as Luke Skywalker when it comes to lightsaber dueling, as he seemed to be able to defend the Grand Master's assaults without a large degree of difficulty, and there is no indication that Luke Skywalker was going easy on his opponent. Though arrogant in his youth, Kip Durron grew to be a highly experienced, if somewhat aggressive, tactical fighter, distinguished among his peers for his craftiness and determination. Like many counselors of his caliber, he is capable of being dropped in cold in a high variety of situations and making quick and effective decisions to respond to them. Though rarely employed, the Jedi Master was highly skilled in the use of body language to goad adversaries. Durron could also be quite analytical with the situation called for it, often taking the measure of his opponents in order to adjust his attacks and respond accordingly. In conclusion, Kip Durron was an all-around outstanding combatant, possessing skills high enough to challenge the very best of his era on equal terms. This matchup is hard to call. While both combatants are incredibly skilled and have gone toe-to-toe with some of the best fighters in their era, neither has faced a combatant like their opponent. Kip Durron is not the fancy fencer that is Dooku, neither is he the no-holds-barred offensive heavyweight that is Darth Sidious, coupled with the fact that he is a master of a style unknown to Yoda, and this results in a seeming disadvantage to the Grand Master. However, Durron has never faced an opponent as unique as Yoda, will be coming at Durron in ways with acrobatics and force abilities that none of his opponents were physically able to do. Arguments can be made for both Durron and Yoda on who would be better equipped to deal with the other, along the lines of Luke's speed being comparable to Yoda's, and Durron's dexterity being comparable to Dooku's. However, it is undeniable that Kip Durron's fighting style is much more well-rounded than Yoda's. It is important to note that Durron does not necessarily have to be able to defeat Yoda outright to win. He only has to survive long enough for Yoda to get fatigued and tired, as he has proven that he cannot sustain himself for marathon lightsaber duels. After Yoda is sufficiently fatigued, it would be a simple cleanup job for Durron. Given these facts, I feel it is only fair to award Kip Durron the edge as a martial artist and lightsaber duelist. Next we move on to Force abilities. Although much of his early development has not and likely never will be explored, Grandmaster Yoda was unquestionably the greatest light-side Force wielder of his era. Due to his centuries of training and study, Yoda's philosophical and academic understanding of the Force and Jedi lore was legendary, and likely will never be repeated. And his natural aptitude was considered by many to be second only to that of Anakin Skywalker. Though not a dedicated physical combatant, Yoda's small stature and aged physique coupled with the Ataru fighting style has required him to develop a prodigious mastery of Force-based physical augmentation. He mainly used this power to amp up his speed and reflexes to ridiculous levels, turning himself into a blur and his lightsaber a fan of green light as he flew around his opponent with Force-assisted acrobatics. This was only enhanced by Yoda's mastery of Force valor. Delving deep into himself, Yoda was able to amp up his physical output even further, through a strong connection with the light side of the Force. Grandmaster Yoda was an advanced and powerful telekinetic, though his applications were erratic at best. When it came to grand-scale army killing, Yoda employed his powers quickly, with no restraint, and was nothing short of absolutely lethal. He has been shown more than once scattering battalions of troops with Force waves, and turning the Battle of Coruscant, he used the Force to push troop transports into their dropships before forcing these landers to collide with one another, sometimes in mid-air, by altering their flight paths drastically. However, when it came to personal combat, Yoda was far less efficient. Not only was Yoda slower on the draw, but his applications of telekinesis became much more basic. While some may attribute this inconsistency to either poor writing or the natural contradictions of a franchise as large as Star Wars, I instead see it as a natural limiting factor inherent to Yoda. It has been noted that it is much tougher to penetrate an opposing Force wielder's force shield, especially if it is an active barrier rather than a standard passive one. Additionally, Yoda's personal mastery of having strong focus and a pacifist Jedi philosophy. This can be best summed up by a quote from Yoda himself: "A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack." Due to this philosophy, Yoda's combative Force skill was based predominantly around defensive and counter-offensive measures. Yoda preferred to use his power to negate those of his opponent rather than sweep them away with his overwhelming might. As mentioned previously, while his attacks were relatively basic, his counterattacks were incredibly varied. When a Yinchori warrior opened fire on Yoda and Jedi Knight Soon Bates attempted to deflect the shot, Yoda responded by lifting Bates into the air while simultaneously deflecting the blaster bolt with his bare hand, all the while yanking the warrior's weapon from his grasp and slamming him into a nearby wall. While Count Dooku and Darth Sidious attempted to pelt Yoda with thrown objects in their respective duels, Yoda yanked control away from them and redirected the objects either harmlessly to the side or directly back at his adversary. Dooku even noting he could not beat Grandmaster Yoda in a duel of the Force. That isn't to say that the Grandmaster was incapable of penetrating the barriers of other Force adepts. He can and has done so, but rather, whenever he is faced with an opponent of comparable power, Yoda has chosen to use his powers for purely defensive purposes and leave his attack sequences to his lightsaber. While the Grandmaster's aptitude for Force healing is nothing to write home about, Yoda has been depicted using the ability to recover from injuries and improve his combative longevity. Yoda's strong attunement to the Force allowed him to develop into a formidable telepath. Yoda has been shown using the Force to erase memories, conceal his Force signature, and use Force bonds to communicate across vast distances. Yoda was also a master of the rare art of battle meditation, using the art to improve the morale of his troops while demoralizing and confusing his enemies. Additionally, he also possessed an aptitude for farsight, being able to catch glimpses of the future, though they were at times involuntary. Although lacking any offensive energy-based powers, Yoda possessed an incredible aptitude for Tutamenis. Yoda would use the ability to redirect blaster bolts and more impressively manipulate and redirect and absorb Force lightning. However, both the Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith novelization both note that doing so cost Yoda a significant portion of his energy reserves. That being said, absorbing Force lightning being cast from the most powerful Sith Lord in galactic history for any length of time, if at all, is a very impressive feat. Yoda is perhaps most famous for his ability to transcend the physical plane as a Force spirit. While this power has no combative usage, having the ability to retain one's consciousness after death as an entity of the light side is an impressive display of one's connection to the living Force. In short, Yoda was nothing less than a Tier 1 Force wielder, and it would be suicide for anyone who did not have comparable strength to go against him. The second oldest son to two non-forceful parents, Kip Durron was one of the most powerful Jedi in the Order's history, boasting a nearly unparalleled connection to all aspects of the Force. As far as his relation to his peers in terms of power level, Kip considered himself to be more powerful than Grand Master Luke Skywalker. However, my doubts about that particular statement are numerous. First, that statement was made by Kip during Kip's younger years as a Jedi Master, and, as previously stated, Kip is known for being somewhat arrogant, and Kip himself admits in the same sentence to having the same belief from the moment he met the legendary Master at the age of only 18, 1 year younger than Luke was at the start of A New Hope. Next, this assessment was based on what Force feats Kip believed would tire out the Grand Master quicker than him, and not on any sort of contest of Force strength, nor was there proof on Durron's part of the Grand Master being tired more easily by those feats. Additionally, it has been stated in numerous sources that Grand Master Luke Skywalker is undisputedly the most powerful Jedi Master to have ever lived, and surpassing all Jedi that came before and all those who would come after. This, if nothing else, proves that Durron was at the very least less powerful than the Grand Master, if only slightly. That being said, being a serious contender for the second most powerful Jedi to ever live is definitely an incredible feat to Durron's name. While Luke himself has never weighed in on Durron's respective power level, the Grand Master has repeatedly praised Durron as one of his greatest students. Skywalker has repeatedly applauded Durron's power in the Force and referred to him as frighteningly powerful. Unlike the Disney canon, that means something. Even other members of the New Jedi Order were not above praising Durron's strength, with both Jaina and Jacen during the time frame of the Mid-Yuzong-Vong War, noting just how powerful Durron was, and Jedi Knight Worth Skidder estimating that Durron's strength was at least comparable to Grand Master Skywalker. As mentioned previously, Durron's prowess with physical augmentation was prodigious, having traded blows with the Yuzong-Vong Slayers without too much difficulty. He has also used the Force recovery techniques to help heal himself after forcibly crushing himself into a metal cylinder in order to escape the Sun Crusher superweapon. Moving into the realm of energy-based powers, Kip Durron had a strong affinity for Force lightning. Though varied in color and composition depending on his mental state, Durron's summoned lightning was just as deadly as those summoned by the Lords of the Sith, which was unusual for a Jedi, as it denoted that not only is the ability to summon lightning rare among Jedi, but it is unusually weak compared to true Sith lightning. And while he has overwhelmed the Tutamenis defenses of Luke Skywalker as an 18-year-old, he only did so after being power-amped by the spirit of Exar Kun, and it should be noted that this was pre-prime Luke Skywalker, who is more comparable to his Dark Empire era than his Grand Master era. Speaking of Tutuminus, Durron possessed a high level of skill with the power being able to deflect blaster bolts and dispel bursts of force lightning. Though the power of the level of lightning that he could reliably disperse is unconfirmed, though not counted as the great telepath of his era, Durron's skill in this field should not be discounted. He has used force persuasion to influence crowds, used force concealment to hide his signature, and force bonds to communicate over long distances. Durron was also able to use the rare Battle Mind ability that was used to forcibly rip information and memories out of a target, usually in what was described as a traumatic psychological experience for the recipient. Kip has also possessed an ability with Farsight, though the specifics of his range and scope with this power are unknown. As far as more esoteric abilities are concerned, Kip Durron is of only a handful of combatants from across the galaxy capable of using both the Aura of Uneasiness and the Alter Environment abilities. The Aura of Uneasiness was a dark side power that caused the caster to project an invisible shroud of energy that caused all to walk inside of it to feel a general sense of malaise. The effect on weak to non-force wielders was an inability to fully concentrate on the battle at hand. Alter Environment was a neutrally aligned power that allowed the wielder to control various aspects of nature. In Durron's case, he had been shown calling down lightning bolts from the heavens, deadly enough to kill a young Leviathan in one shot. Last, and certainly not least, we have Kip Durron's speciality, and most impressive power, telekinesis. In terms of offense, his force blasts were enough to incinerate multiple rats, hurl massive boulders, and push back concussion missiles mid-flight. At multiple points during the Yuzon Vong War, Durron used force waves to move, crumple, or outright destroy medium-large starships. Feats all the more impressive considering that they were accomplished instantly and without notable exertion on his part. In more subtle uses, Durron has disarmed opponents and thrown loose objects at his opponents with deadly accuracy. Luke Skywalker having compared the speed in which the objects are thrown to a Yuzon Vong Thud Bug assault. Kip Durron has also proven he can reliably penetrate the barriers of council-level opponents, having ragdolled Jaina Solo and Corran Horn as an adult. Durron supported his offense with a strong telekinetic defense, and has only been shown having them penetrated once by Council Master Kent Hamner. This was arguably a fluke, as Durron was currently engaged with Corran Horn, who has almost no aptitude with telekinesis, and so Durron might not have had an active guard up at the time. Finally, we have the most impressive feat in Durron's arsenal that not only cements him as one of the most powerful Jedi of all time, but a feat that has only been accomplished by one other Jedi, Grand Master Luke Skywalker. During the mid-stage of the Yuzon Vong War, Kip Durron channeled the largest amount of power he could muster in the time allotted and successfully stopped and moved a black hole that had been created by a Dovin Basal. Given the fact that a black hole the size of a nickel has more mass than the planet Earth, and that this black hole was at bare minimum the size of a starship, this feat is nothing less than one of the top 10 force feats in the Star Wars universe. To reach a firm conclusion, I believe that some canceling out needs to be done. Neither are advanced Tier 1 telepaths, so those abilities cancel out. Physical augmentation cancels out as well as with all other non-combative force powers. When it comes to the realm of energy-based attacks, I believe that all those cancel out, as despite the noted power of Kip Durron's Force Lightning, I highly doubt he is capable of summoning lightning more powerful than Palpatine. If Yoda can keep up with that level of power, he can keep up with Master Durron. Additionally, if he could not, he could always use his lightsaber to absorb the bolts. Durron's own aptitude with Tutuminus allows him to defend against any redirected energy launched at him by Yoda, therefore negating using lightning as a trump card, and neither has shown the ability to catch a lightsaber blade, so that will not come into play. The last realm of a possible advantage comes in the way of telekinesis. While Yoda's displays of power are indeed a sight to behold, it is undeniable that not only has Kip Durron matched those feats, he has surpassed them. Where Yoda scattered troops, Durron has pulverized them. Where Yoda caused starships to collide, Kip destroyed them himself. Where Yoda moved armies, Durron moved black holes. One can also not stress enough the importance of Yoda's unwillingness to attack his opponent directly with the Force. While this is normally a non-issue for Yoda, as 99% of his opponents are weaker than him, a part of the 99% Master Kip Durron is not. A pure Force duel between the two would likely see them start on an equal footing, only for Durron to continue to ramp up his power, only for Yoda to be slowly left behind as fatigue begins to creep in on him. However, if Durron slips up for even a moment, it will be he who is left in a broken pile on the floor. All that being said, Jedi Master Kip Durron is awarded the edge in Force abilities. Lastly, let us look at their weapons and equipment. Yoda uses a standard lightsaber Shoto with the green Ilum crystal. A lightsaber Shoto is a standard lightsaber with a shortened blade that causes it to sometimes be called a light dagger. However, in this case, Yoda wields a Shoto as it is proportional to his small size, and as such it provides no extra benefits other than familiarity with his own handiwork. Kip Durron wields a lightsaber with a purple-hued crystal as the focusing lens. The hilt is standard, and there is no extra benefit save for familiarity with his own handiwork. Due to the fact that both combatants wield fairly standard lightsabers with no special benefits, no edge will be given for weapons and equipment. And now, the verdict. For this fight, let's say it takes place in the Jedi Temple ruins of Dantooine, with multiple loose objects of various sizes for the combatants to use. Additionally, let us assume that for the purpose of this fight, neither combatant recognizes the other, because one or both combatants recognizing each other would cause the combatants to behave much more differently than normal, and as such would not be an even playing field. As this is the first time two Jedi will face off against each other, we will assume that both Jedi understand that they will fight to the death. Additionally, and as per usual, and to keep the playing field even, neither combatant will have time to prepare for the battle, and the fight will start with both combatants in full view of each other. As a final tally for this matchup, I see the victor winning 10 times out of 10. This will be a scenario of one majority victory. Let us begin. Kip Durron stared at the green creature before him, and could not help but wonder if this was some sort of cosmic joke. Seen through his eyes, his opponent was a tiny, frail creature who needed a cane to walk. Seen through the Force, however, his opponent was one of the most powerful nexus of the light side that he had ever seen, shining a beacon comparable to a sun. Igniting his lightsaber and adopting a ready stance, he waited for his opponent's first move. Yoda stared back at his opponent, who was a rather average-looking human. He opened himself to the familiar currents of the light side and felt just how powerful his opponent truly was. Discarding his cane and robes, Yoda ignited his lightsaber and sprang at his adversary. In this early fight, I see neither combatant as being able to truly get an edge over their opponent. Yoda will be fighting at full power, and Durron is less inclined to let loose with the full power of his Force abilities and combat immediately. The green creature sprang at him, with a crazy acrobatic attack sequence that moved faster than the eye could follow. Relying on instinct more than anything else, Durron quickly executed a series of tight blocks, shunting aside slashes and parrying thrusts from the creature. Ducking under a fan of green light, Durron found himself continually on the defensive, as the creature was seemingly both everywhere at once and nowhere to be found. Durron was using every trick in the book he had to stay one step ahead of his opponent, and he still could not find the time to launch his own attack sequence. Durron was fighting to survive as he felt his long hair be slowly cut by a passing lightsaber, his robe singed from strikes that had come just a little too close. Durron had only felt this level of pressure once before from Luke Skywalker, though unlike his bout with Skywalker, Kip knew that a failure to keep pace would result in his death rather than simple embarrassment. Opening himself up to the Force and starting to study his opponent's sequences more carefully, he simultaneously began charging up a force push, waiting for the creature to take flight again. As the creature launched into another cannonball assault from above him, he released the push, sending the creature flying across the ruins. Yoda reversed his somersault mid-flight and landed upon a shattered pillar, staring his opponent down. He had not faced a combatant quite like this one in his long years of service. His opponent used a fighting style that had flavors of the classical forms, but no true dedication to any one of them. Yoda did not have long to try and take the measure of the man when his opponent came flying at him with a strong overhead cleave. Leaping to meet his opponent head-on, Yoda prepared his next move. The mid-fight is where I see this duel ending 5 times out of 10, as Yoda will start to feel fatigued and Durron will start to truly ramp up his abilities. Meeting his opponent's attack with a strong block, Yoda cartwheeled away from his opponent before launching another sequence. This time, however, at the end of his last rotation, his opponent was on the attack, driving Yoda back with broad sweeping power blows and sharp attacks designed to ward off any form of counter the Grandmaster could come up with. Slash, stab, cut, punch. His opponent came at him with a style that was incredibly deadly but not at all tricky. Despite the relative simplicity of the style, Yoda noted that its simple parameters were simply a basis for the combatant to put their own spin on it, and his opponent was no exception. Yoda realized he was not facing a master of a specific form, but rather a general-purpose personalized combatant that was able to bring the fight to him in unexpected ways. Wary of his growing fatigue, Yoda timed his next action perfectly, and he careened into his opponent's stomach, eliciting a grunt of pain as a reward, as the taller Jedi flew backwards, landing several meters away. Kip realized that he had fooled around long enough with the creature and launched a stream of lightning at his diminutive opponent. To his surprise, the creature simply dropped his saber and caught the lightning before redirecting it onto Kip himself. Thinking quickly, Kip managed to dispel the burst of lightning. Deciding on a new tactic, Durron picked up a large pillar nearby and threw it at his opponent. He didn't wait to watch the creature struggle to catch the pillar and push it aside, before he jumped at his adversary, blade drawn for the kill. Yoda barely managed to get his saber in front of his hand and back up for a block before his opponent came crashing down upon him. Sustaining a blade lock for only a short time, his opponent leapt away as Yoda's danger sense caused him to jump to safety. As a split second later, a lightning bolt came crashing down where he had just stood. Momentarily dazzled by the light, Yoda continued his leap to cover under another shattered column, and waited for his eyesight to clear while keeping his force senses on his opponent. While doing so, Yoda realized he did not have much more of a fight left in him. Resolving to end the fight quickly, Yoda leapt from his hiding spot with another blur of motion, aiming to cut down his opponent. The late fight will result in some saber combat, but in my opinion will transition into a force duel. Yoda will not be able to sustain a lightsaber duel for much longer, and will likely happily oblige as he did with Darth Sidious during their fight, and like that fight it will become mostly one-sided. Kip Durron was starting to tire of this game. The small green creature was continually in motion, and was near impossible to track once the sequence had begun. While he had faith in his abilities to defeat the small creature, Durron was growing wary of continuing to stay on the defensive. Letting loose a force repulse followed by a force wave that sent his opponent flying, he began charging up his force reserves to end the fight once and for all. The next few minutes were a blur for Yoda as he leapt around the makeshift arena, dodging, blocking, or redirecting attacks from his opponent. Yoda found himself using all the skills in his arsenal to redirect boulders, make pebbles disappear in a fan of green light, or send lightning back at its caster. Every so often his danger sense would alert him to an incoming bolt of natural lightning that he would have a split second to leap away from or absorb into himself. Growing ever wary, Yoda leapt in front of his adversary for the final confrontation, charging up his full power to release on the man standing before him. Kip Durron saw the creature land in front of him, and he knew that the time to end the fight had come. Opening himself into the sustaining power of the light side of the Force, Kip Durron let loose with the full force of his telekinetic power, and felt the creature do the same. The two forces collide between them, distorting the air and creating a strong gale that causes their robes to flap violently and loose objects to be launched away from the convergence point of their power. For a moment, that's all there was, just their power being brought to bear on equal terms. The Guardian of the Order versus the Maverick of the New, throwing everything they had at each other in an all-out, winner-take-all contest of who is the better combatant. Then, that moment was gone. Yoda felt the last of his Force reserve slowly slip away, and Kip Durron watched as his power pushed the creature's power back until it hit him. The full force of Kip's Force wave hammered into his opponent, launching the creature at an incredible speed into the ruins of the temple, with such force that its already weakened structural foundations were shattered and began to fall in on itself. And Kip Durron felt the life essence of one of the greatest Jedi Masters in history wink out as the temple collapsed around him. And thus, I declare Jedi Master Kip Durron the victor. Inspiration for this matchup came from researching feats of Jedi from the new Jedi Order, and during this research it came to my attention that Kip Durron was quickly racking up some of the most impressive feats second only to Luke Skywalker and Jason Solo. Realizing how powerful he truly was, I decided that there could be no worthier combatant than Yoda himself. Despite my combat forecast of a 10-0 victory for Durron, it could hardly be called a stomp for him, and serious mistakes on his part or blind luck on Yoda's would result in Durron's death. That being said, the more I looked at Durron's feats in comparison to Yoda, the more I realized how slim of a possibility it truly was for Yoda to be able to speed blitz Durron, and considering Yoda's lack of stamina, if he didn't win in the early fight, the best he could do was to delay the inevitable. Thank you all for watching this episode of the first season of the Versus series. Keep in mind that this is all my opinion of a hypothetical matchup, and feel free to leave comments, criticisms, or suggestions for future matchups in the comments down below. This is the Phoenix Exalt signing out, and may the Force be with you always.